Welcome to Around the Fire, a space for conversations to nurture hearts and build lives following Jesus, thinking more deeply about big ideas and how to apply them.
Hiya, that was Johnny. I am Sarah. I just did a little jig as you did that then. It's like a little rhythm to it. We are friends and leaders. We get the joy of being part of the team and leading the team here at Elim Life Church in North Birmingham. You are welcome around the fire. We love to have conversations, thinking about what does it look like to find and follow Jesus, and how do we do that, and how does it help us on a wet Wednesday? How is this good news to us? So we are in the second episode of a 4-series arc. Can I call it a 4-series arc? Yeah. I just did. There we go.
Call it what you like.
Where we are thinking about this terminology, soul, home, near and far. But we love your feedback. We really do want to build community online with all of you who are listening or watching. Hi, everyone. So you can get in touch with us, podcast at elimlifechurch.co.uk. Give us your feedback, your questions, your suggestions, your reflections, anything really. And it really helps us to sort of shape what we're doing with the podcast and to build that community.
Yep, really good. So we are the second part of 4 in this conversation. We have been thinking about soul, home, near and far. And we're thinking about Acts chapter 1, verse 8. And then we are going to amplify some thoughts around that. We're going to keep looping around. If you haven't caught up with the soul episode, then you can. That's available wherever you found this. Just go backwards one. And so we're going to keep speaking to this idea, really. Where do we want to start? Because I know in your deep love and concern for biblical translations, you've over invested in what you want to bring here.
I just thought I'd read a different translation of Acts 1:8 just to help set us up. So these 4 episodes will kind of be referring and like Johnny said, coming back around. So Acts 1:8 in the Good News translation says this: "But when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, you will be filled with power, and you will be witnesses for me in Jerusalem, in all of Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth." And so when we're talking about soul, home, near and far, it's our attempt in community and in praxis to think about these layers of what it looks like to follow Jesus. And we're understanding, if you go back and watch the other episode, that in this communication in Acts here, that the author Luke is using these places of sort of geographical location to really help us think about people, the expansive nature of the kingdom. For a lot of those who'd been following Jesus up until this point, they'd been really sort of located in one particular area. And so just this sort of like up and out as to what the Spirit was inviting them into, really, and what was going to come to help them to find and follow Jesus once Jesus has ascended. Yep. And so we find ourselves having thought about soul, and now we're thinking about home. And I don't know about you, but when you hear the word home, you might not have positive connotations around that word. So we want to have a little bit of a conversation about what we mean by home, because what we don't want to happen is, as we're talking about in community and maybe helping anyone who's listening or watching to think about this, for you to discount yourself, because either you don't feel like you've got a home, or you don't feel that you want people in your home, or that you haven't had a good experience of what home means. And so, what do we mean when we're talking about this idea of home and community? What we use the word community interchangeably. So help kind of people understand what we're trying to do with that.
So I throw community out there to mean everyone. So then to help bring some distinction and positive clarity around that, we talk about home as your community of faith. People who you are in willing kind of submission to. You are your acts of service are going to be the beneficiaries of and first past that group of people. You are committed to figuring out your existence with a group of people, and the model and the form and the shape that takes is between you and Jesus and that other group of people. And so that's why we use community of faith or community of believers, or we're trying to broaden the scope of language available to that. But when we're talking about home, that's what we're talking about. And for loads of different people, that I think is probably more of a composite picture than we often are recognizing.
What do you mean by composite?
I think there are voices and people that you're in community with that you don't necessarily share physical space with.
Okay.
Especially in the days that we live in. I think it is really, really possible and positive for you to be part of a home spiritually that has people that are dotted all over.
Yeah, we've been a little bit amazed, actually, that some people have connected in
From
with
all
our
over the place.
community of faith
Yep.
from lots of different places and spaces
Yep.
around the globe. So when we're talking about so homely and far, that's just another way that it's not limited to sort of like a geography thing.
Yes.
You know?
So it's helping us understand what it is. So it's community believers, but then it's also helping us understand that that is not, we're not defining that by a
Attendance
physical,
on a Sunday,
a
gathered
physical
space,
location at a certain time to do certain things. And some people really like the vagaries of that, and it's been really, really helpful in opening some of those doors. Some people get really frustrated about, why can't you just say church? We know what you mean when you say church. And my point is, no, we don't. We really, really don't. And so we are in England, and most people's presumption who do and don't follow Jesus, when you say church, that's not what we look like. That's not how we operate. That's not how we move. That's not.
So that might be like a state kind of church, or that might be about a building that looks like follows a particular format or structure.
And our building doesn't look like an Anglican building. We're not administrated like the Church of the State. We don't believe the same things as the Church of the State. And so to say church actually is giving people the wrong picture of who we are, which potentially only leads to frustration, confusion, disappointment, angst, which is not what we're about. So the potential muddying of the waters in the communication actually brings more clarity by saying, okay, well, where is your community of believers? Where's your community of faith? Where are people who you are committed to around some agreed things, around this is what we exist to do? And they might be in a shared physical space. Cool. They might be that plus dotted about all over. That might be a frequency that you engage with every single day, or that might be a frequency that you engage with twice a year.
Yeah, so for example, I'm part of the physical community of faith here at Elim Life Church in North Birmingham, but there would be people who are home to me in that sense, who we don't live in the same physical location anymore.
Right.
And so one of the ways that we are encouraging each other and cheering each other on in our Find and Follow Jesus is we use an app and we do a Bible study together. So we use it to put notes in it, or we'll WhatsApp, or we'll voice note each other. We're praying for each other regularly. We're talking regularly. We're sort of committed to helping each other find and follow Jesus, but we're not physically in the same location.
Yep. And this can be misunderstood as a bit of a modern interpretation. There is definitely modern application in the tools that are available to us, for sure. But this is fully inspired by Acts 1:8. Like, this is as old as time itself.
So you're going to start singing. We can't afford the copyright for that.
Trying to save the voice. But this is, I would argue, consistent with a methodology that we have seen right throughout. And then for our part of the world and some of the church tradition that we receive that maybe hasn't been as familiar to us specifically, our tribe and our tradition, as it has to other people in other parts of the world for longer periods of time. We also live through, as evangelical Pentecostal leaders in 2025, we receive the wake of consequence of our tribe, and our tradition has a really weird relationship with things like house churches. It also has a really weird relationship with institutionalized religion. And so we receive kind of the wake of there being a little bit of nervousness around some of these thoughts and these ideas. That's not what this conversation is today, but that's to say that we are reintroducing maybe some ideas that are perhaps a little bit older than our tribe would always be more comfortable with recognizing. They're not the answer to everything.
No, this is a framework, like we sort of said in the previous episode, this is a framework that's helping us think about how we do that, how we build community. And particularly this idea of home is really helpful for us when we're thinking about church, when we're thinking about building community, because what it does is it takes it out of a platform and into a coffee. And so it helps us to think about the difference between a meeting or a service or a gathered space where people come together for a specific purpose, perhaps, and that always connected, always on, open door, open table. You know, the image of a table is really, really important to us in community. Right for like the last 3 or 4 years since you kind of came and joined the team here and leading the team here, that has become so important because we really believe in that. We really believe in meeting, eating and praying together. We have opportunities for anyone and everyone to start one of those spaces or to join a space. And it's not like you're signing yourself up forever. And it's not that this big programmed thing. It's like, what would it look like to meet, eat and pray with people who love Jesus? Yeah. And how can you encourage each other, cheer one another on, pray for one another, support one another? And so that's one of the ways that we're doing it. But it takes it away from this somebody performs something and I passively watch to, I need to put the kettle on.
Yes.
Or perhaps I'm making the sandwiches or the jollof rice or the puff puff or whatever it is in your community that kind of makes sense to you. And so we've been quite deliberate in that language to say, hey, it is about community of faith, but not just in a gathered physical building location. It's how are you cheering one another on? How are you loving each other well? How are you, so much of the New Testament is about community. It's about building it. And there's this element of the organic, you don't ever know who you're going to be friends with. Isn't that beautiful? Like you could connect with someone and you might have some best friends in your life that you haven't even met yet. How gorgeous is that? And so there's an organic sort of element to that, but there's also an intentional, like life will become full of whatever we let it become full of. And so there's also this intentional invitation to go, how do I kind of make this a part of the priority as I'm following Jesus? Soul, home, near and far.
I think it gives us more options. I think it gives us more variety. I think it gives us diversity. I think it gives us inclusion in really positive ways. I think it gives us voices and lenses that our tribe, I'm not talking locally specifically, but our preference for how we have organised faith community has lacked in part because it's been so focused through very specific things, and those very specific things are good things. We're not cross at those, we're not getting rid of those, but our broadening definitions of your community of faith, where home is, we are making a clear distinction because it's a really important part of what we believe, that home no longer is limited to your biological family.
Yeah.
It's no longer limited to your household. It's no longer limited to a place of employment or a sports team or a favorite band or all of that now comes under the authority of Jesus. Therefore, which is New Testament for pay attention, there is no longer, I'm thinking of Galatians 3, which is a really formative part of this puzzle when we're thinking about what home is, in that we are defined by our belonging to Jesus.
Yeah.
And so now, who's welcome at the table? Well, it turns out everybody is. Where is home? Well, it turns out it's everywhere. And then what does that look like when we gather in those ways and in those moments, which can feel quite subversive if you are used to, this is not an age statement, this is a practice statement, if you are used to going to a place to do a thing, and that being defined as your faith community. Now, your faith community can include those things, absolutely, but similarly, as we were talking about to soul, if
limited.
That's all that ever is, then that's a problem. That doesn't work. That's not universal, and so therefore it can't be kingdom, in my opinion. I know people feel differently about this, and so it's not...
It's our podcast, you can have your opinion on it, it's fine.
Do we like it's not saying that there isn't a time and a place for specifics that belong to a community. Absolutely. There are situational specifics. Of course there are. What does that mean? I have many, many years of experience of leading communities in communities of faith in a community where a food bank would be a ridiculous thing to do. That wasn't the situational specific that was going to help us communicate the things of Jesus. There were others and other things and other practical needs that we led the line with, but that wasn't the specifics. And so that's just one example of like, we can't just reduce a community of believers down to
have you done this?
Have you done this?
That?
Have you got that? Do you do this?
And also
do you
because
meet
communities
that?
change, so that's the other thing as well. Is
Rapidly.
your because of live in an online world as well, so that changes quickly. Your local community can change. People moving in and out or on. Some places are more transient than others.
Yeah.
If you've got a big student population, or if people kind of, you live rurally and lots of generations kind of move away for work, perhaps.
If you live in a commuter town.
Or on a commuter, your community, actually, your home then becomes probably the people you work with more than it does the people
your
you live
literal
next
neighbours.
to.
Yeah, totally. And so my contention, and then our kind of presentation of this to community again, and we don't do this as like
here's what you need to know.
Yeah, right. We don't do like a one and done, this is what we mean by it. It's the introduction of these ideas repeated over time, and they're available for those who want to pick at them, and those who don't, we're not trying to stress them out about that. If your capacity, your awareness, your phase and stage, your whatever looks like, I don't really need to know the mechanics, but I need to know that somebody's available when I'm hungry, or when I need whatever, or I need to pray with somebody,
or
or I
need
to
pray with me.
We're not like, well, do you understand what we mean by home before we pray with you? It's never that. But for those who, and we have people who are like, oh, I think I see what this is doing now in a way that I didn't 18 months ago, and so I would like to do something different about that. That's the point. It's always invitational.
Always.
It's always open.
It's massive for us, that language of invitation.
It's not like, if you're part of Elim Life Church, you must, you shall, you ought, you will. They're not. Again,
we don't have like a big sort of like Excel spreadsheet somewhere where we're ticking off all the things.
No, we have a colleague who might, but like we don't do that.
Yeah, but she helps keep us organised, so that's all good.
We need that. We need that. But we don't have. So let me give the specifics of this an example. So traditionally, you might be invited into a faith community, and then there might be a conversation about membership, and then part of that membership conversation looks like, okay, well, these are our values, this is our mission, and this is our vision. And so what we need you to do is memorize our values so that you can articulate our mission, so that you have possession of our vision, so you can see and understand what we're trying to do. We don't do that. We don't have that. It's been a really deliberate choice to obfuscate some of those things for a few reasons. One, to help us think about these things.
Yeah, and to go back to our conversation in the previous episode, to own that for yourself. Like, what does that look like for you? Because what that looks like for somebody else might not be where you're at.
And to get locked into a vision and a mission and a value, the minute you write those things down, they immediately become outdated. And so you've done a good job of like helping us think through, actually, it's always been the Great Commission. And this recommissioning that we see in Acts 1:8 here, this like another piece of the layer of what it looks like, that's always been the same. And so how do we do that in community and home? And to belong to communities that are about those things, I would argue, doesn't really need, like, we're trying to reinvent the wheel here a little bit. Like, we've been given from God, which is what our faith is rooted in, right? This is how I want you to live. This is what I want you to be about. This is what I want you to do. And I understand, and I'm bagging on people and not giving them a seat at the table and a right to reply, but this is why we do what we do, and why we do it the way that we do it, and why, in part, we think we are just starting to see some of I'll cash in on some Christianese, some of the fruit of thinking about it differently, of like, there are, and this is ideological, but this is also real life. We are seeing a growing number of younger in life stage families joining Elim Life Church. In my experience and in our professional awareness, what they don't want, need, or have capacity for is another long list of things to do. They're just at a phase and stage in life where everything is pushed right to the edge of what feels realistic, achievable, like manageable, that sleep has ceased to be, nutrition has ceased to be, employment is complex and convoluted, everything's expensive, having dependents who cannot protect, feed, clean, or change themselves, turns out is quite an all-encompassing vocation.
And life stage.
Life stage. It's not forever, but it is for now. And so our responsibility is to help people find spaces where that can be true, where they don't have to pretend about that. They don't have to lie about those things. They don't have to...
Or feel guilty if they are not at the things that everybody else is at or connected to the
Availability
things.
has changed. So then I can't evidence my commitment to my spiritual household in the way that perhaps I'm used to, or the way that I've been validated for, or the way that I've been included, or the way that I have been marked out in community. So then our responsibility as overseers in this community is to go, no. You're still a part of the household. Just our collective responsibility moves now.
Yeah.
It just looks different now. And so as you are, feeding dependence or learning what working from home looks like, or understanding what stepping out of, a career looks like, or stepping into a whole new community of other kind of people in similar life stages and caregivers, and what does that look like? How can we best support and encourage you in that you don't cease to exist, but you exist in a different way?
Yeah.
Now, that is constantly happening for all of us as we move through life. So you have talked very publicly about how your interaction with community, through no fault, choice, or demand of your own, changed dramatically. And if we as a collective had enshrined, written in our own stone tablets, this is what it means to be a part of Redeem Life Church.
If you're not around on a Sunday for this, that, and the next thing, then
we would all fall foul of our own insistence on those rules. And so instead of doing that, perhaps then there is a different way to understand what belonging, what having a home looks like.
And it's not because we don't, so I just want to be clear, it's not because we don't care, because we care really deeply about this stuff. And it's not that we don't want people to use your kind of picture, the group that you're sort of using as our example of young families. It's because we really care, because we know that in every stage of life, what, like Richard Rohr talks about, like, how you do anything is how you do everything. And so understanding that there will be particular pulls and pushes in that world. And so we don't want anyone to feel like they've got to abandon home or abandon community or kind of put that on hold while they kind of bring the kids up. But like, how do we help you to find and follow Jesus in home, but it might not look the same? It's because we care so deeply about that we don't want to limit it to, it's got to look like these 4 things.
I think
we do have a framework, like we talk about community formation, we talk about centered on Jesus in contemporary culture. So it's not, I think sometimes when we have conversations with people, it can occur, it can seem to people at times, I think, that we're not necessarily really thinking about this. We're just trying to think about it differently, because we sense that's what the Spirit's inviting us into. And it's not a judgment statement on anybody who's doing it any differently, but just this is what we as home feel that God's inviting us into.
Yeah, and I think the overwhelming majority position would be of that school of thought, and then we just have the ability to make an honest assessment of how that's working for us, and then out of that assessment, what's appropriate to change, what's appropriate to think differently about, what's appropriate to maybe reconsider. And again, we make a big fuss, and I hope people kind of pick up our fuss about this. And it's not through negative comparison. We're never making decisions through negative comparison. It's just the honest evaluation of, is this helping us do the things that we feel we're being invited into? And if the answer is no, then we want to be brave enough to do something about it, and not just have an opinion about it, and not just to whine about it, but to be actively involved in doing something differently about it, which is what we're trying to do. But that if you are busy doing what you've been invited into, and you perhaps have not investing your time to think about the methodology of community formation, because it's quite niche, which is fine. So that's our responsibility.
Around the fire podcast listeners and viewers.
That's what we are thinking about, and that's what we think about a lot, and that's why we do the things the way that we do them, and that's why we resolve to this language of home from Acts 1:8, of, okay, so then if I am to witness to the things that God has done in my internal world, so I take ownership and responsibility for my decision to come under the authority of Jesus and to acknowledge that to be true, and by faith believe that Jesus is who he says he is, then that's not the end of that conversation. That's not the limits of that conversation. So then where does that stop? Where does in those like ripples of that consequence decision. Where do those ripples end? And it's helpful, it can be helpful for us to identify, okay, well, the next ripple then is those who also believe these things to be true.
So people like me.
People like
in
me.
terms of a faith understanding,
And what does that look like? And we use the language of home to articulate that next ring out from you as an individual. In that it deeply coded into the Christian story is the necessity for others.
Whether that is like biological family households or whether that is sacred friendships, you know, or whether that is a team that you might be a part of, or
just to rehash a point we've communicated before, but like if we are made in the image of God, then we're not singular. That we're looking for at least two other parts, like if nothing else, to be a bit hammy about it. Like if God has said for God's self, the way that I want you to understand completion and existence is community. The way that I want you to understand in whose image and likeness you are made is the
Father, Son,
necessitates
and Spirit.
Father, Son, Spirit. So then what makes you think that you would be able to do this separate to the mold that you've been pushed out of? And again, part of what we are trying to in health subvert a little bit is to not presume that looks like singularly and exclusively a marriage context or a sibling context or
I think it's really important. So, and I speak as a single person, because I think sometimes when we use the language of family and home, for a lot of people who are not married or don't necessarily use that kind of language to describe themselves or identify themselves, that can feel very othering. And so that's why we're really wanting to try and help people understand that home is about community. And you can be, that happens through investment and intentionality, not just because you happen to be either married to someone or sharing a space with someone. And so again, that means that for everyone everywhere, you have a seat at the table. And I think that is really important because, and I know this is a slight tangent, but because we're talking about home, in our world, like often marriage or a family, a biological family or an adopted family, are seen as like the pinnacle of Christian experience. And actually what we're saying is that's one way of expressing your life, one way of living your life. But that actually singleness, marriage, whatever that looks like, everyone's welcome at the table. I think that's really, really important. So in terms of generations, in terms of gender, in terms of ethnicity, in terms of kind of status, in terms of class, into all of the ways in which perhaps we identify ourselves or others identify us, like, you're welcome at the table.
And this is what makes it really...
You can make home.
You can make home. And the other face of that coin is what many people in my experience struggle with, because what we can find easier is to identify, well, who is going to uphold the rules? Who's going to make me feel safe by agreeing with, well, this is who's in and this is who's out, which is part of my subversion of using the word community, in that I mean everybody by that. And then the defining kind of silos, if you like, that we talk about home and near. And home, we're talking about believers, people who believe that Jesus is who he says he is, while still pushing back a little bit at refusing to define a believer. The qualifying parameter for that is, do you believe Jesus is God and is alive? Because if you do, come and have a seat at the table, because Acts 1:8, what we are asked to do is be witnesses to what God has done, not qualify who gets to sit at the table. A repeating message that is so complex for us in our unredeemed humanity to figure out. And listen, this is not like signing off on sin, but like what we find so difficult is we want to qualify who's allowed in the room rather than pinning the doors open. And what we are being asked to do is be witnesses to what God has done, not determine who God approves of. Which we still really, and again, it's not lost on me that in the language, and we're going to talk about the next episode, for Nia to be Samaria, you cannot not think about the Good Samaritan, which is a consistent ethic for who is my neighbor.
Yeah.
Out of this tension of no. You seem to constantly want to be obsessed with the reducing somebody to how you can approve or disapprove of them. That's not what I'm asking you to do. What I'm asking you to do is be witnesses to people like you, a little bit like you, not like you, couldn't be less like you, to who I am and what I've done. And that's the story I want you to tell. And then I will work out what that means, what that looks like. I'm not asking you to define a community by rules that will make you find other people easier to administrate. If we are the people in possession of stories of the ark, I use this one often. I've talked about this on here often. Like, we enjoy the kids' My First Bible Story version of the ark. It is not a pleasant thought to me that conditions inside that boat for that amount of time.
Just because you're an introvert and you know you need to.
But like, imagine the noise, the smell, the chaos,
the sounds,
things that are used to eating the things that they're now stalled next to. And this is not about if you are not of the literalist tradition, extend that as an idea, like to be housed with things that you think smell awful, sound awful, get in the way, like things that you are used to consuming as fuel on your own journey. The layers exist there. And if we are the people in possession of these stories, say, no, but you're all kept safe by being together. That is this picture in this moment of like, no, it's not up to you to decide who's allowed on the boat. What's up to you is to witness to what I've done. Which this helps us do.
Yeah. And I just to follow on from that point, I think we might take a break in a minute, but just as we were kind of thinking through this and as I was kind of reading, I reminded myself of in Luke, so Luke 8, Luke writes Luke and Acts. And he kind of has this description right at the start of Luke, where he describes the community that Jesus is building. And he says he took his 12 disciples with him, along with some women who had been cured of evil spirits and diseases. Among them were Mary Magdalene, from whom he cast out 7 demons, Joanna, the wife of Chuza, Herod's business manager, Susanna, and many others who were contributing from their own resources to support Jesus and his disciples. So as Jesus is on the road and building community and present with humanity, fully experiencing a human experience as well as remaining God, he decides to draw people in that when we read it now, it feels almost like it just trips off the tongue, familiar. It would have been wild. It would have been to bring all of those people together. There's different places that people are from. There's different society, kind of stratas of society that are there. There are different wealth things there. There are different kind of ethnicity and ideas. There are different religious ideas. In other places, the disciples are perhaps named, in terms of the religious sect that they used to be a part of, or, their role in community as a tax collector or as a zealot. And so you see Jesus like making that space, opening that door, like finding a seat at the table for those who are wanting to follow him. And so you see that right at the start. And I think sometimes when we read through these accounts, we miss those little kind of pointers to us of, oh, no, this is who Jesus is. This is how he has chosen to build community and communicate the good news of who he is, of who God is, of what life with him looks like forever, of his, his plans and his purposes to see everything renewed and restored and redeemed. And it has always been with people. And it wouldn't have been easy either. You read through the letters of the New Testament. It wasn't like this sort of like idealized, romanticized version of a community of people that are all very different and suddenly now they're all together and it's all lovely and floaty. Actually, they had to work through some of that stuff. And in perhaps when we get to far, we'll think a little bit of a story with Peter and Cornelius where you see that like starkly sort of explored of people who are not like us. But yeah, it's this picture of, I think community can happen when we're like choosing to engage with it, when we're choosing to be home, to make home. So I wonder if we'll kind of think about that
after the break, because that's a really important part of our kind of definition and distinction of what we mean by home. So if you are listening, we're going to take a brain break. If you are watching, then producer Andy is about to release the tension of thinking about all these things through something exciting and fun and colourful, and who knows what that might entail. All right, we'll be back after the break. Thanks.
welcome back from the brain break. Hopefully that was fun. I'm sure it was. Producer Andy is brilliant at those things. And so we are in a conversation, the second part of a 4-part conversation around a framework that we are using and making the most of as part of Elim Life Church community in North Birmingham. So we've thought about soul, and now we're in the second part of thinking about home. So we have spent a little bit of time defining what we mean by home as a community of believers, people who follow Jesus. How are we trying to do that? Like, what does that actually look like in practice and in praxis? What does that look like? How are we doing that?
Bunch
How
of
are we
different
attempting?
ways. Yeah, we're giving it our best shot. A bunch of different ways. So some of it looks really known, and I don't know if we'd use the T word, but maybe like a bit more traditional. If you're used to those gathered community spaces. So we, when you and I are new to people, once they've like recovered from the shock, we talk about, oh no, a Sunday would look very much like a Sunday in most places. Like, we're not really messing with Sunday. We're starting to, but Sunday would be quite traditional for our tribe, in that would look quite familiar. But where more of the invitations and opportunities have been through the rest of the week, in that adding value to the rest of the week and not disproportionately communicating Sunday as having any higher or greater value than any of the other days or times of the week. Looking for people to self-organize and for us to encourage that. What I mean by us is, as a leadership team, for us to add value as people are self-organizing around things that they feel the Spirit of God is inviting them into, hobbies, interests, responses to need in community, in-house and wider world, special interest projects, or third sector spaces, whatever that looks like, without the commission of making that a part of what we do as Elim Life Church, but how people feel supported in that, in getting on with the rest of it. So we, the language that we use, and the first kind of wave tool that we use for that is spaces. It's the language we use where we, like you talked about, we encourage people to meet together, eat together and pray together, and anyone can do that at any time. We just ask that you let us know, so that from a safeguarding point of view, we know what's going on. But you're not commissioned into that. You don't have to go on like a 10-week spaces leaders course to do that.
We're pretty good at resources. There's loads of resourcing available if you want to use those in that space, or it could literally just look like a coffee at a local coffee shop with some friends, and you're just chatting and praying together. It's
trying to be intentional in our resource creation so that it's scalable outside of whichever gathered moment its maybe first intention is for. So could this be used, online, a group of people who maybe don't have English as a first language and are not situated in the city that we're a part of, will be some of the questions that we so
we will often produce digital first. Any resources so that everyone can have access to it, whether you're so home near or far.
And whether you believe like us or not, so that there's a route in. And sometimes we make editorial decisions that might need a bit more work, or in conversation, or we want to encourage you to connect with a specific thing or person or whatever. And so we use the language of hybrid a lot. We've talked about this a couple of episodes back, so I'm not going to rehash everything that we've kind of said, but we, if there are a multitude of choices, the answer is yes, in that we want to do our creative best in serving as much of that as possible, not through the avoidance of decision making or the vagaries of greed, but there's a little bit in my, and then by association, our response to what we're doing, in that to be too stylized or to be too singular in, we only produce resource for this type of person, or we only gather in this kind of way, or we only have opportunities for, I don't know, you have to be in a small group and they can only meet at this time, and they can only talk about what we've decided, and they can only, the outcome or the call to action can only be whatever it looks like. We just don't feel that is what we're being asked to do. And so keeping it really broad, really wide, really, really open. Now, there are some obvious and some less obvious consequences with that.
Yeah, and we're working this out in real time. So like in 2 years' time, we might have a different kind of sort of wisdom or perspective on this, but it is that sense of there there is a framework for that. We want you to meet and eat and pray together because we see that as a picture that home gets built around meeting and eating and praying together. The community gets built around that, where people are investing in being with others, whether that's online or in person or through a WhatsApp group or whatever. There is an element of intentionality in that, but it is also then we want it to be sort of Holy Spirit organic as well.
And one of the biggest shifts in that is that we don't do the administrating of that.
Yeah. Which I have found really hard when we first started doing this, of like, I don't know what's going on. But as we've got into it, I can see how releasing that's been for people. So if it is about being a witness to who Jesus is and what he's done, the way that you are fulfilling that and saying yes to that cannot be administrated into just this one place, one time thing only, I don't think now.
Yeah. So a huge piece of this puzzle is the decision that you get to make to choose to be a part and involved or not. In that there are not perhaps as many, what's the best use of language here? There's not as much coming to you anymore. You are going to have to go toward it a little bit more, which is effort and energy, which ironically are some of the things that we're aware of and that we're trying to make that a bit easier for people, because they are often the things that people...
because you don't want people to feel disenfranchised. Right. It's the exact opposite what we're trying to do with that then.
I also think what we see, and in my experience of doing this over maybe a longer period of time to being here specifically, the lie that seems to come with that is that you're not welcome, you're not wanted, which is a lie.
Yeah,
which is a lie.
It's the exact opposite of what we're trying to do.
Opposite. But what seems to be the learnt behaviour in those gaps is that, well, if they wanted you there, they would have asked. And like, where's that come from?
Yeah.
Where have you learnt that lie? Because the way of Jesus is always invitational. Like and I'm thinking of a multitude of examples, but I'm thinking of where the young ruler, depending which version you're reading, the rich young ruler comes to Jesus and says, I've done all the things.
Yeah, I've ticked all the boxes.
So what do I...
I've done the religious observance.
Give me the good stuff. And he's like, great, sell everything and follow me. And he's like, anything but that. If you got anything else, like anything else in there that you can give me.
Sure, you said something different to somebody else.
Yeah, and I think...
That's the point, right?
And I think in 2025, what we would have done is we would have got Jesus to do a TikTok video inviting him to meet him at a time and a place. He would have produced a resource for him to read and consider and think about. We would have given him a small group activity to go away with his mates and think about. We would have given him a resource bundle that he could have like taken to his place of employment. We do all of these things, by the way. Yeah. So like we're not against these things. No. But ultimately...
But it's not this linear, it is amplification rather than this linear, like you've done this, now you've progressed. It's not like a computer game where you have to complete something to progress to the next level.
And do you know what Jesus did? Carried on.
Yeah.
And
that's wild, isn't it? When you get your head around that. And also what he was saying was specific to that person because that's what they needed to enable them to think about soul and home. And that's again why it can't be just one thing, although we really do believe in resourcing people, and that's a massive value for us.
But this is the difference.
So that you can pick it up as and when you need it, right?
So you have tools to... there's more, and this is a brand name, so like track with me, but there's more Velcro to like stick stuff on, and there's more hooks and loops, and sometimes we're responsible for creating the hooks and sometimes we're responsible for creating the loops, but like the intention is that, oh no, you can add this piece and you can add this piece, and if you don't want it you can take it off and swap it for another piece. But the bottom line for the necessity for any of that, so let's use a consistent example. I'm getting a bit waffly here, so let's tighten this up a little bit. The ongoing metaphor we use of a backpack, and that we have been given everything we need for life and godliness. It's available to us. And so anytime you choose to reach into the backpack, that's a decision that you're making. The assumption is that somebody will provide for you out of the backpack, pre-assembled, pre-cooked, pre-organized, pre-made, and all you need to do is just sort of happen to float around at the right time, and somebody else will assemble your discipleship for you. The words of Jesus and the invitation from the Spirit of God for the glory of God seem to be, if you want to come, you can, let's get going. Yeah. But it's, and I know for maybe the more pastorally inclined and maybe the more evangelistically inclined, like, but what about the one? Jesus forsakes the 99 for the one. And what about and absolutely all of those things are true, but that still resolves to this ultimate faith decision of, if you want to follow Jesus, you're going to need to move your feet. Like you're going to have to make that choice to walk well, which is consistent language through scripture for discipleship. And so we are choosing to reach for some of those tools that can feel a bit sharp in points for some, can feel a bit too woolly or a bit too vague or a bit too, but what about for others. And I feel, and then we are leading through this as a result of some of the privilege of my role in community, that they're the right tools for now. They're not necessarily the same tools forever, but they are getting us to a place where we can do some of the things that we're excited about and some of the things that we would love to do, but we need to have some of these things in place to go, oh, actually, for change to be real in the communities that we're a part of, that will not be the abstraction of an event. That will be a group of people choosing to live like they believe forever is real now. And that happens when we are mutually dependent and supported on each other, the Spirit, and the scripture, that we live like we believe these things to be true, and then we articulate our actions towards eradicating hunger, homelessness, isolation.
So it's not,
debt.
Because I think one of the things that can happen when we start to have conversations like this is I can almost hear people going, oh, that feels very inward focused. That feels very, as you might have heard the phrase navel gazing. That feels very like me centered. That's not what we're trying to do. We are trying to put Jesus at the center. And build community around that. And then together, you will find something in culture, in your community that God just draws your attention to. And that's one of the ways in which you then are expressing your faith in Jesus or loving people well. That could be around homelessness. That could be around food poverty. That could be a justice issue. That could be, people who have been kind of through domestic abuse or violence. It could be anything, but that together you're then able to do that. And together could look like, hey, would you guys pray while I volunteer for this? Or would you help me to shape this? Or would you,
pay for this?
Or would you pay for this? And so a lot of the time we talk about collaborative. So all of our resourcing is collaborative. It's not one person sat in an office trying to come up with something. It's lots of us working together. And we recognize this is a privilege. Like we're not unaware that we're very grateful that we have a kind of opportunity to do that. But it's also interdependence. And one of the ways that we've been trying to think about that is look again at Ephesians 4, look at the body of Christ image, look at this idea of those with apostolic, prophetic, evangelistic, shepherding and teaching graces, and going, that is not a threat that you see something different to the way that I see it. How can we help each other in that? And I think there's been so many, and we've got some episodes of people in our community who've been talking about that, but it's been so releasing and liberating for people to go, oh, yet it is completion, this picture of home, it is completion, it's not comparison, it's not competition. And together then we are joining in with those kingdom invitations, right? With those opportunities to encourage each other, because there will be a moment in all of our finding and following Jesus where it just feels so hard or so painful or so difficult, or you feel like you're on top of the world and you could do anything. And so we need each other in that. Yes, we need scripture, yes, we need the Spirit, but we also do need each other. We need saints, don't we? We use that language.
And as a little bit of a course correction to perhaps how community, faith community is being formed in our tradition, we can either pretend that the gaps don't exist. And what I mean by that is we're not resolving the tensions and the issues in wider community as well as perhaps we could be, because we specialize in very specific skill sets and we overdevelop, in my opinion, the skill sets that are quite internal, that are quite, set up to make a Sunday happen in that kind of way. And there's a time and a place and all those sorts of things. However, the argument that I'm putting forward is we can either pretend the gaps don't exist, which seems ridiculous because we all know they do, or so then when we acknowledge the gaps, you've got two responses. You can either be embarrassed or you can see them as an opportunity. And I'm choosing to see them as an opportunity. It is embarrassing that we have stylized a methodology that has left significant gaps in the community formation that they're involved in. That's a different conversation for a different day. But I think as people with the privilege of leadership and making these decisions, to what we are gently doing, again, not through negative comparison or through kicking off or shouting and screaming or looking for who's to blame, but just taking consequence as ours to deal with and going, well, there's some gaps here. And so what would we like to do about these gaps? And so it's a significant pivot to thinking about these things in a different way, gives us a better chance of a variety of things holding equal weight in community.
Yeah.
And instead of saying, wow, we would love to do something about that, but actually we exist for these things, so we can't really do anything about that. This, I am contending, and we are working out, perhaps gives us the mutual submission and support to be able to go, oh, all of this matters. Yeah. And so what then is your part, which then by association becomes our part in that. And so instead of going, that's great, but it doesn't really fit into what our community exists to do. Our community will exist to fit in all of those gaps, but it might not look like you doing the things that
or me administrating it,
or what producer Andy's being invited into. But we then can recognize when producer Andy is back into those gathered spaces, when he moves into that quote unquote home space, say, guys, this is what I'm involved in, this is what I'm working on, this is what it looks like. To them, what you were saying before, can you prayerfully support me? Can you financially support me? Can you feed me? Can you walk well with me?
Yeah, can I bounce his ideas off?
And instead of me going, I don't want to do that. That's not how I want to spend my life. I get to go, absolutely, because can you likewise do the same for me as I am being invited into doing these things?
It's this interdependent thing, totally. Isn't it? Which is I feel like I'm a broken record on this, of we are completely dependent on God, but we are made to be interdependent on each other. And there are people in places in the world who don't have access to that because of lots of different reasons. And so I often am thinking, God, how do I enjoy that? How do I invest in that? An author and a sort of artist that we both quite like, a guy called Scott Erickson, he talks about you are a contribution. And so it's not that we're saying you've got to be doing lots of things, but what is the outworking of what you're investing in terms of your soul, of what God's saying to you, of how the Spirit's leading you. How do we do that with each other? How do we cheer one another on in that? How do we support? How do we, to go to an Old Testament picture of Moses needed some people to lift his arms up while he was praying so that there could be a breakthrough in a particular area. So it might look a little bit like that, rather than, it all is sort of centrally organized through an office. That actually, as Elim Life Church, we are seeing Jesus moving in ways here, and that might be a physical space or an online space I never get to go into, but through our prayers and our giving and our support and our encouragement and the space to dream and think and create and collaborate, we're trying to do that. And I know it sounds really idealized as I'm saying, it sounds so idealized, but we're trying to put some really practical things in. So because this is part of my responsibility in community, how we pray is shaped by Soul Home Near and Far. So every month we kind of have a resource that helps us think about how we're praying Soul Home Near and Far, and what things might help us or inspire us or provoke us or give us an opportunity, with the invitation of, hey, if something captures your attention, what do you want to do about it? How do you, it might be, so we might be praying for some people pastorally who are, with permission, have given their information and please can you pray about this thing's going on in our world, this is an area of need, this is something to do with my health, with the invitation to go, might I also then be able to practically support in that? And the same with Home Near and Far. And so we're trying to do that. And then I've just recently launched something called Compass Prayer. So we're trying to get people and inviting people to say, hey, tell us about what your life looks like. We might gather together in different communities and different places and spaces, but I don't know what your Soul Home Near Far looks like through the week. So can you give us a 30-second glimpse into that we can share? And then we're going to be praying. And what will happen as we start to do that more and more is I will see someone across a room, perhaps on a Sunday, and go, I watched your Compass Prayer this week. I had no idea you worked in this place. I also work in this place. I wonder if we could collaborate on something or connect on something. So it is trying to find some of those ways that help us in that, I think, as well. So that organic and intentional, I know I keep saying that, but I think there's a mix of, hey, I'm open to what I see as interruptions, but actually it's the Spirit of God leading into other places and spaces, as well as I'm intentionally looking to join in with community and to be a part of community and to contribute and to receive, that there's this mutual interdependence with each other.
For sure. And there are moments and times where you need to be the recipient of the benefits of a community, of course. And our hope and our expectation and the tools that we are hopefully giving people and the opportunities that exist within what we are responsible for look like every opportunity to receive from that and also to contribute to that. And so it's less of administrating people's personal practice and more about the wider invitation to connect with people. And that's not as straightforward for everybody as we would like it to be. If you've got a different set of expectations of what a community of faith exists to do, then that's always going to be a conversation. And that's a conversation that we're happy to have. And to understand that we are going to set some people up to win, and we're going to set some people up to be a bit confused about what's wrong with just, doing it the way we've always done it. And if it was working for an individual in that format, we're not cross at that individual, but the kingdom hasn't been experienced and isn't known to everyone. Yeah. So then we are duty bound to keep exploring and adventuring and looking for opportunities rather than preserving what feels a very stylized and specific moment for a very small group of people. And if the invitation is to the ends of the earth, if the invitation is to far, then we have to keep giving away perhaps what we would prefer for the benefit of each other, which is again another picture of the invitation to follow Jesus. And the opportunity that we get is to trust Jesus in the reinvention of community, to try it again for the benefit of another. And not like idealizing that either. No. So like we kind of amplify and cycle back around to places like Ephesians 4, where I just want to read this verse. Like verse 32 says, instead be kind to each other, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, just as God through Christ has forgiven you. And when I was thinking about home, I was thinking about my experience of home is that sometimes as a kid, I got on with my parents and sometimes I didn't. And sometimes I got on with my brother and sometimes I didn't. And you had to work at like coming back and putting things right and moving forward. And it's the same in any kind of homes, community of faith. And so there are ways that we're trying to do this as well, that we're trying to be kind to each other. We're trying to kind of follow the example of Jesus in the way that he was kind, and so some of those things are really important to us in the sort of what that looks like and how we're trying to do that. We really want to encourage people to be kind to each other. These stories, these letters were written to actual people who were experiencing this. I think I said that in one of the episodes, I can't remember now, but it's real people in real time. And it wasn't like, oh, just because we all believe in Jesus, then everything's all kind of hunky-dory and yay, let's go. So we need to kind of put into practice some of these practices and that interdependence happens as we're able to go, I maybe I wasn't kind, so instead I'm going to try and be kind this time, or I'm going to maybe put something right with someone, or I'm going to maybe forgive someone who didn't see my preference or didn't understand me in that particular way, or I'm going to keep my heart tender in the sense that I'm not going to become cynical, or I'm not going to become hardened to the need of another in my community. For sure. It's really good. Really good.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we're about done, aren't we? Is there anything else that you haven't said that you wanted to say about this?
Probably, but we're at time, so we need to wrap this up. Okay.
My final thought on this is we live in a time and a place in life where we are digitally more connected than we've ever been, but lots of people would talk about feeling very, very lonely. And there's a huge piece of work going on around the world at the moment around this idea of how we build really good friends And so I would just encourage you to maybe, if you're thinking about home and community and it just feels too big, to think about, okay, who could I become friends with? Who could I think about that might be like me or might actually not be like me at all? Who could I like maybe connect with in a particular way? So yeah, there's some really great things out there to help you with that. But just to maybe start thinking about, actually, if I am a contribution, that looks like relationships, and all of us have the ability to connect with each other. So yeah. Anyway, let me finish with praying our soul home near and far prayer for us. Father, in my life, let your kingdom come through Elim Life Church, or the community that you belong to. Let your will be done for our city. Let your kingdom come, and within creation, let your will be done. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much for being here with us. If you've got questions, thoughts, ideas, where does this find you? What does your home look like? What does your community believers look like? If we can be helpful in that. If you are somebody responsible for overseeing a community and you are feeling that sense of transition and would like to work that out, get in touch. podcast@elimlifechurch.co.uk. We like to do this with real people in real places.
Yeah.
So if that's of help or of use to you, then give us a shout, and we're happy to do that. We will be back for the next two. We're going to talk about Nia in the next one. So we'll see you then. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.